one of the craziest moves was the Green Bay Packers trading up to get Jordan Love. They had a very wild draft, to say the least. Let's just get broad strokes right off the bat, Kyle. What did you think of the Jordan Love decision?
I had saw a lot of like pundits and people talking about this potential pick as a Jordan Love range for the Packers. And at the same time, I didn't really don't think it really makes any sense. If any, all of us are just about watching the Last Chance documentary right now. And one of the craziest things was Jerry Krause deciding to blow up a team that won 5 championships in 7 years and deciding that he wants to rebuild in the midst of this championship run that's unprecedented. The hardest thing to get in football is a franchise quarterback, and probably the hardest thing to get in sports is a franchise quarterback. If you have that kind of talent, you might as well milk everything you can out of it and not disrupt anything. Like, why would you want to upset the one guy that's probably the most indispensable player on your team? And I had the Packers as one of my biggest losers in free agency, especially losing Balaga, who's one of their key offensive tackles, and obviously has protected Rodgers for the majority of his career. And now not only do you lose Balaga, but then you're giving him competition. I didn't understand the pick, and Rodgers has never been a guy that's been easy to work with, and that's been well documented. And there's already moments of, rumors of infighting between LaFleur and Rodgers. So what's at this point, it seems like that they're ready to get Rodgers out the door as soon as possible. I mean, I know he has the contract for 4 years, but who knows how long this is going to last after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's here's why I don't like this move. I don't like this move because I think that when you're this close to a championship, they were a win away from going to the Super Bowl. Yes, they got blown out in that game, but they were still a game away from going to the Super Bowl. And I really did feel like what made the Packers so good was they had a really good offense, but they needed a second receiver. That seemed like, or at least a second receiving option, whether that's receiver or tight end, to give to Aaron Rodgers, to give them a chance to, when teams double Adams, to have somebody else to throw to. And they managed to draft every position on the offensive side of the ball except for wide receiver. To me, this draft was not a good draft. And I think getting Jordan Love here, it's not helping you today. Now, I will put the exception that if Jordan Love happens to be what some people think he can be, which is, the next Aaron Rodgers, well, then it's a good move. Then, I mean, getting someone who can be this elite quarterback with the 26th overall pick, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I just don't think that's going to happen. And I think that I would much rather see them get a wide receiver with this pick. Maybe they just didn't like any of the receivers on the board, but I think they could have gotten value that could have helped them this year and potentially turned them into a Super Bowl winning team. And I just think that they did not go that route.
Yeah, I don't see any of those receivers stepping up as a true number 2 option. Plus, Jimmy Graham's gone. Jimmy Graham was terrible last year, but at the same time, he was still a weapon on the football field that could be used. And I didn't like a lot of what the Packers did on offense last year. I thought Aaron Jones should have been utilized a lot more, especially, if you have a good running back, especially with how short their lifespan is, you might as well use it as much as possible while you have a good running back. And I felt like Aaron Jones was actually pretty underutilized in that team. And there's a lot of Jamal Williams when he just clearly wasn't as talented. And now the game plan is already to double Devontae Adams. Why is anybody going to why does anybody care about the rest of the receiving core on that team? And why doesn't, AJ Dillon's not going to move the needle at all. And I agree. I mean, one of the themes I have of this draft was I actually thought a lot of teams did really well. And I'm usually pretty lenient on draft grades, but I thought a lot of the teams actually did very well in this draft. And I don't have any complaints about a lot of different teams, but the Packers are definitely one of the biggest losers of this draft because they had one specific need that seemed very obvious to everybody, except for apparently their front office, who's in love with Lazard as a number 2 option.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Like, I don't think that I think that they didn't really improve at all through this draft. And obviously, if every team is improving except for you, you're essentially getting worse. So, again, this could easily be the kind of thing that in 4 years we look back at this and Jordan Love is, dominating and we're saying, okay, I guess we were wrong. Guess this was the correct decision. I just don't know if I see that happening. And sometimes it's okay to pass on someone who you even really like if it means that you're going to get, uh, potentially a Super Bowl out of it. I mean, at the end of the day, not every team can be the Patriots. You have to try to find a way to get that one ring. And I just think that they messed this up. I think they messed this one up. That's just my opinion. But let's also move on, and we can kind of talk about both in the same way because they were not the only team that has a franchise quarterback that went out and drafted a quarterback earlier on. I was less harsh on this team when I made a video about them. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this. We're talking about the Eagles. This will be the last one we do before we get into just going in order. Uh, the Eagles selecting Jalen Hurts with the 53rd overall pick. What was your thought about this decision?
Yeah, so once again, obviously, we're kind of blowing through all the biggest, the most shocking teams, and like I said, I was very lenient on a lot of draft grades. I thought a lot of teams did very well in this draft, and I thought the Eagles were one of the teams I was also grading a little more harsher, along with the Packers. But it wasn't for the Jalen Hurts pick. I didn't really like the Jalen Rieger pick with the first round. I thought there was better players out there as far as wide receivers go, especially the guy right after him was Justin Jefferson, who I think is much better. He's really fast, he's really long, and he had 4 touchdowns in a national championship game. Um, I thought he would have been a really good pick in that range, and instead they went with Rieger, who I didn't think was nearly as talented as Jefferson. But in terms of the quarterback pick, I understand the pick to Hurts, and honestly, the comparisons to Taysom Hill I thought were really insulting. You know,
Mhm.
People forget, he got benched in that national championship game, but it wasn't crazy to say that Jalen Hurts was actually like a fringe Heisman contender until he got benched in that game, you know.
Mhm.
And Taysom Hill threw for 2,500 yards his best year in college, and he graduated at like 25 because he went to BYU. To
Yeah.
compare him to Jalen Hurts, who is actually good,
Mhm.
was just kind of insulting throughout the entire draft process. And I think he has a lot of traits that could be a good starter at the next level. I think he needs to focus on not like staring down one option at the next in the NFL, and that's going to be
Mhm.
one of the biggest things because I do think he's actually pretty accurate. He's got a pretty good arm, and he's pretty good with some timing routes as he showed at Oklahoma. But the staring down the one receiver is going to be a problem at the next level, and a lot of teams are going to figure that out. But if he ends up figuring it out and is able to look off some defenses, I think he could be a very good player, and it makes a lot of sense also with a guy like Carson Wentz as your franchise quarterback to make sure there's a contingency plan in place in case Wentz gets hurt because he's proven time and time again that this guy's probably not going to play all 16 games for the year and maybe not even the playoffs. So Jalen Hurts makes a lot of sense. The only question would be, in my book, would be while a quarterback makes sense, is getting a rookie as your backup contingency plan a better option than going after a Jameis Winston before he was signed to New Orleans, a Cam Newton as a potential 1 year backup option, or even it seems like Andy Dalton's probably going to get cut here rather than traded. Getting a guy like Andy Dalton on a cheap contract after he's released by the Bengals. Is that a better option than, say, Jalen Hurts coming in as a rookie, potentially for Wentz as a contingency plan?
That's a fair point. That's something interesting. Yeah, to carry off your Rieger point for a second, I also thought that Ayuk was even a better option than Rieger, who went to the San Francisco 49ers shortly after as well. But yeah, in terms of Hurts, yeah, I mean, listen, you know, what you could have gotten a Case Keenum, who I think got like $8 million with the Browns, but you could have gotten maybe even a cheaper option with a Cam Newton, with a Jameis Winston, with one of these guys. I don't think any of them have the upside that Hurts does. I mean, Hurts definitely can potentially be great. One thing about Hurts is that we know he can come off the bench and play. We know he can come off the bench and perform. So that's something that could matter. And I have to say, one of the things about Eagles fans, it drives me crazy, is if you say that Carson Wentz is injury prone, you'll just get 100 people in the comments saying, no, he's not. It's been all fluky. You can only get injured so many times before we have to say, okay, there is something wrong with you here. You're getting injured to some degree. Maybe that's just your play style more so than your actual body being injury prone. But regardless, you get hurt enough times. Teams can't just roll out with Josh McCown as your backup. They have to, use some assets, whether that's cap space or a draft pick. and make sure that they can get a solid backup. I don't hate this Jalen Hurts pick at all. I didn't have a problem with it. I know Eagles fans are going crazy. What are you doing? They got a receiver that they like. I don't know if he'll be, I don't know how good he'll really be, but they got a receiver that they like. And then after that, they got a backup quarterback. I think backup quarterbacks are important. Jimmy Johnson said the most important position in football is a quarterback. The second most important position is the backup quarterback. So, uh, I don't hate this pick at all. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, this team is what, 3 years removed now from winning a Super Bowl, and
I think
yeah,
so. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, this team still has a lot of talent, and I think they added a lot of really good players. My favorite pick from them was actually their third pick, which was Davion Taylor at 103. He fits the perfect mold of a linebacker in today's football. He's really fast. He makes a lot of tackles, and I think he could be a contributor as a rookie even for the Eagles. But yeah, I mean, I just the upside of all these receivers was, this was talked about as a generationally, you know, great receiving class.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure Rieger was one of my top four receivers. And so that was where I hurt the Eagles. And I can't fault the Hurts pick at all. He's proven at two of the best colleges in the country that he could be a very good quarterback. And we'll see how he can develop. Like I said, he has some things that at the next level they're going to figure out about him. And he's not going to get away with some of the same mistakes he did in college. But there's a lot of things you also really like about him. I think one of the things that too many teams fault themselves on in these drafts is they talk themselves out of every player. They said, oh, well, he does this wrong. He does this wrong. Well, Jalen Hurts did a lot right, and he won a lot of games because he does a lot right. And I think the Eagles are focusing on that and focusing on the talent of what he does right, and that makes him a good pick at that position.
Yeah, agreed. One last thing before we move on. I also want to bring up, it probably is helpful for Doug Peterson to have a guy who can run RPOs and can actually run with the football pretty well as well. So just another factor to throw in. I like the Hurts pick. I kind of glossed over the Rieger pick because I thought like that's the bigger storyline.